$4.3 billion in fines from American and British regulators on a host of banks for rigging the FX market. I'm joined by Kara Scannell. Kara, your nickname before was The Verdict when you were the legal correspondent. You're now the investigations correspondent. We need a new nickname. Do you have any ideas? Because if not, I'm going to ask the audience to give it to us.
I think you should ask the audience.
All right, fine. She didn't like the Snoop. All right, she didn't like the Bloodhound. We need a new one. Send an email to cardiff.garcia@ft.com and nickname Kara Scannell, investigations correspondent. All right, let's talk about the FX market. What exactly are the banks guilty of here? Explain it, because all week we've just been hearing about how they rigged the FX market. Very few people have explained it in very much depth. So what did they actually do?
So what the regulators have alleged, and the banks have settled on, but they did not admit or deny wrongdoing, was that essentially traders would, quote, bang the close. So they're at around one key benchmark, which is this 4 p.m. Rate. That is it, basically 30 seconds before 4 p.m., 30 seconds after 4 p.m. The trades that come in, they knock out the outliers and they figure out that's the fix.
The WM fix.
The WM fix.
Sure. Okay.
So that's the critical point here. What the allegations are is that traders, knowing that that's going to be the fix, would have positions lined up that could benefit from it being one way or the other way, and that they would be in these chat rooms. There were multiple chat rooms. Some you had to be invited in because you had to know someone who knew someone to get you in.
And they had like weird names for themselves, and it was all, I mean, the typical, it's like the LIBOR thing all over again, right?
Right, right. And some of the names were like cartels, so it didn't exactly help their defense argument that this was not viewed in some kind of nefarious way. So what had happened then is they were then communicating amongst themselves, figuring out where they wanted to put it, and then would act together and right around that key 30 seconds before the fix, 30 seconds after.
Okay, and we don't actually know very much about how much money the banks made on this activity that they're alleged to have done, right? I mean, this is we know what the fines are. Do we know how appropriately sized the fines are relative to how much money they made?
Well, they're record fines, at least for the FCA. You know, I don't think anyone has really articulated how much the banks have made from this. You know, I haven't seen that clearly defined. I think it's more of the fines represent more of the sentiment that the banks still have not cleaned up. They don't have good compliance over certain areas of the bank. Some of this conduct was taking place as the LIBOR investigation, which was also about rigging benchmarks, different benchmarks, but as that was taking place. And so what message was getting through to the culture of the banks to clean things up? And I think that's why we see the fines being so large.
Yeah, our colleagues at Lex harped on this a little bit, right? The idea that the LIBOR investigation was going on, and yet this activity in the FX market continued right on through. So whether or not you think that this is like some terrible thing, it's just kind of stupid that these guys sort of didn't get a handle on it and shut it down. Is that the right way to think about it?
I think it is. I mean, I think that's why there's also, you're seeing the reaction from the regulators, because it's like you've been on notice, you've had warning, and so why haven't you stopped this? Why hasn't there been more of a wholesale look at compliance in order to catch these things and stop them?
Right. Let's talk about what's next, okay? Because not every bank that had an opportunity to settle did, and some regulators are still involved here. So take us through that. Which regulators are still looking to get fines from the banks, and which banks might still be potentially in trouble? So
this was interesting. 6 banks had approached the UK Financial Conduct Authority over the summer saying we'd like to do a group settlement. Now, kind of immediately, DOJ, the Department of Justice in the US, which is pursuing criminal investigations, did not participate in that. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission did participate, and so that's how we ended up seeing the 5 banks settle. Then we also had the OCC settle with B of A and some other banks, but B of A only was part of that settlement. What we did see at the last minute was Barclays pull from the deal. And Barclays pulled because their New York regulator, the Department of Financial Services, pulled out of that deal at the last minute. So Barclays is a case that we'll see continue to be pursued by the regulators that already settled. And then we also know the Department of Financial Services is looking at a dozen financial institutions. There'll be more cases there. The CFTC is not done with their investigations either. And we know the Department of Justice, which really has, you know, the heavy club of criminal prosecution, is pursuing a number of banks and, more interestingly, a number of individuals, traders and salesmen, who were in these chat rooms and involved in the business at issue.
Okay, so a lot to keep track of, but not a problem at all for Kara the blank Scannell. We need help with filling in the blank. Last question, how big a deal is this, right? One writer, Matt Levine over at Bloomberg, had a really interesting phrase. He said that this was actually just tinkering on the edges of real supply and real demand, but it wasn't like LIBOR where the traders were basically just making things up. I mean, how severely do you think this activity should be punished, or is it something that where it requires maybe more kind of incremental reform, but it's not like this catastrophically evil thing?
Well, I think with LIBOR, it was the system at, these banks are members of this panel. There's a lot that's based off of LIBOR. But even at that point, people were saying LIBOR wasn't really as influential anymore because people moved on to other benchmarks. I think with this investigation, it's still up in the air of how much impact it really had on the market.
Right.
There are some civil lawsuits, so we'll see if anything comes out through that process. And I think what will be very interesting is that we know the Department of Justice, they're looking not only at this collusion on the fix, but they're also looking at whether traders and salesmen had marked up on their clients. And then you might see some harm if you can actually see, causing clients to pay more. So I think we have to wait and see what comes from that.
Okay, fantastic. Folks, she's amazing, but she needs a nickname. Cardiff.Garcia@ft.com. I want your submissions. We'll let you know what we decide. Kara Scannell, thanks very much.
Thanks.